Hello, welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I am Matthew Lucas.
And I am Stephen Ryan.
You are indeed, and we do post every week on a Friday, so hit subscribe if you want to know what our continuing horticultural adventures are, and hit the notification bell to know exactly when our missives should land. Stephen, what is our horticultural adventure today?
We're going to talk about bluebells and their ilk.
And their ilk, and
Yes.
we should prefix this, of course, because it's Stephen Ryan, they are not your run-of-the-mill bluebells.
No, of course not. But they're relatives of the bluebells in 2 or 3 different genera. Sometimes they get swapped around, goodness knows where they end up. But they're wonderful, basically spring flowering bulbs, mostly in shades of blue.
There you go. Well, mostly in shades of blue. Shall we first go and look at one that isn't?
What a good idea. All right, this used to be called Chionodoxa, which translates as snow glory, and the common name is glory of the snow. So there you go. Makes sense. Most of the wild versions of Chionodoxa, which are now all, by the way, included in Scilla anyway, are in blue, like the rest of the bluebell group. And the only reason they were separated from Scilla is that their petals are fused at the bottom, and Scilla's petals go all the way back to the stem as individual petals. So that one's Chionodoxa, or now Scilla sardensis from southern Turkey. This one is a cultivated version of Scilla luciliae, and it's called pink giant, believe it or not. And of course, giant is a comparative term because it's still a comparatively small bulb, but it's a very pretty shade of soft pink. So the Chionodoxas, you can get white versions of them, but most of them are blue with the occasional pink one. And they make great little bulbs, like I have here in a rock garden, or just in an edge of a border in a woodland. And they will self-seed themselves reasonably well. Now, as I mentioned, their common name is glory of the snow, so they do come from very cold areas, and what normally happens in the wild is that they actually do erupt out of the snow. So they're perfectly cold hardy. They do seem to need some winter chill if they're going to grow, flower and perform well. You can grow them in woodlandy conditions, you can grow them in a semi-shaded rock garden. I certainly wouldn't put them out in a really hot spot, and they do like a semi-dry dormancy in summer, preferably on the cool side. So somewhere where the sun isn't blasting down on them. And certainly in my case, I've put a gravel mulch over this bed, and that actually works really well to insulate the bulbs. If you haven't got the conditions to grow them out in the garden, you could grow them in pots, but you will have to refurbish the potting mix every couple of years because the bulbs will have, in fact, depleted the nutrients in the mix. So repot regularly when they're dormant in the late summer, probably every 2 years. Yes.
Well, that pink bluebell, oxymoronic, is beautiful.
Yeah, charming little thing. Although I do have to say that if there's a blue version of things, I'd much rather have the blue one than the pink one.
Oh, no, I don't know.
Yeah.
I love that pink. But, Stephen, that is a hyacinth.
Yes, and very blue. This is the classical sort of Dutch hybrid hyacinths,
Yeah.
which one buys as a bulb, flowers, and then sometimes throws away.
There is a Persian saying which says, if you have 2 loaves of bread, sell one and buy a hyacinth because it will feed your soul.
Oh, well, there you go. I love that.
However,
Yes. And did you know that Hyacinth was, or Hyacinthos, was a beautiful youth, mythologically speaking, who actually died while Apollo was trying to teach him how to throw a discus. So
is that a metaphor, or is that...
I don't know what was going on there, but anyhow.
Throw a
So
discus.
Hyacinthos died, he fell to the ground, his blood brought forward a new plant, which often happens in Greek mythology,
Yes.
but it probably wasn't a hyacinth. If in fact he existed in the first place. So the whole thing's a bit weird, but anyhow.
So why are we looking at this hybrid hyacinth?
Well, because we're going to also look at the wild version of it and how it started in the wild, what the wild one looks like, which is Hyacinthus orientalis, and we'll then be able to transfer backwards and forwards to see how man has manipulated the plant.
And it's from the same family then, I presume, as the bluebell?
Yeah, it's in the same plant family, but different genus. So Hyacinthus is one genus. The fair dinkum, Spanish and English bluebells are in a different but related genus called Hyacinthoides.
There we are. And interesting to point out that the Spanish bluebell is a thug in Australia.
It has
Thug
become,
everywhere, actually.
well, it's becoming a problem in England as well because it's got into the wild. It's crossing with the English bluebell and therefore creating a hybrid swarm. And some people are not particularly pleased.
Oh, the smell of this, it's quite intoxicating. Well, let's go and look at this species' ancestor.
What a good idea. Here we have the wild version of Hyacinthus. So Hyacinthus orientalis. So this is the plant that those rather coarse, dare I say, florist hyacinths were bred from. So you can see it's a much more bluebelly type plant, very much daintier, and I think has far more garden context. This comes from right through the Turkey area, through Greece, right through that sort of Mediterranean belt. You'll find it in the wild, in the hills, in those sorts of parts of the world. The wild form of the hyacinth seems to do best, for me at least, in a semi-woodlandy type condition. So not too much hot sun. Soil that doesn't go baking dry in the summer, doesn't need summer irrigating. This rock garden never gets watered in the summer, so everything that's here has to either survive the summer as a growing plant, or it has to die down and stay dormant through that period. You could of course grow these in pots if you wanted to, but I think the florist hybrid hyacinths, that's where they belong, so I'd probably grow those in pots and this one in the ground where it can sort of look more natural.
Well, you can see family similarities. I think it's got its mother's nose, its father's colouring.
Yes, but it hasn't got the sort of hybrid vigour look of the hybrid ones.
I must say though that I think I prefer the species, and I often prefer species things. Like I prefer, in some regards, species orchids as well, because I don't know, you've got some beautiful species gladioli. They're just less.
Yeah, well, this has been bred to be overblown, and I have to say, in a pot, it makes a fantastic pot plant, but in the garden, I find it sort of somewhat smug and weird looking.
Yes.
It doesn't look right in the garden
You're
to
so
me.
right. I've never articulated that, but whenever I see these in people's gardens, I think, oh, that's so right, but the species looks like a natural...
It's dainty, it's wild looking, and so it has a completely different complexion about it.
Let us now move on to one of these lovely pots next to you.
All right, well, perhaps we should look at a bluebell of Turkish origin.
Oh, look at that, yes.
Yeah, so that is Scilla melaina, comes from southern Turkey, from fairly restricted areas there, and you don't see it grown in horticulture, at least in Australia, terribly often, and it's a very pretty, dainty little bluebell.
Why wouldn't you? Because I always think that Turkish things would do well here, because a lot of, Turkey's a massive country, but climatically quite similar in some places.
Yeah, and look, this does do quite well here in semi-woodland conditions, so it doesn't want to be out hot baked in the garden.
Okay.
So it's a semi-woodland bulb, not dark woodland, just very light, airy woodland. I guess the issue with it from our perspective in Australia is that it doesn't multiply by the bulbs terribly quickly. It only very lightly self-seeds itself, certainly in my garden. So the issue is building up stock of it to have enough of it to share it round.
There you go. So what about, so many bulbs, well, some bulbs like dry summers, some prefer not dry summers. Where does this one sit?
This one seems to be quite happy to dry out in the summer when it goes dormant, but of course, because I have it underneath the canopy of larger shrubs or trees...
It's never going to really bake.
No, it's not going to get baked hot, so it'll stay cool. It generally grows in an area where there's lots of leaf litter and things falling around, so it's mulched as well, and it just pops up every year, does its thing and disappears again. But I have to say, to get a big drift of it, you probably have to plant a big drift of it.
Well, there you go. Now, there is another beautiful drift over in your... What area of the garden are we calling that?
Well, that's my rock garden, I guess. Yes.
So there's a beautiful drift of... What are they in your rock garden?
Well, that's another Scilla, Scilla bithynica. And so we need to go and have a look at that.
What is this drift of magnificence, Stephen?
Well, this is Scilla bithynica. It comes from Bulgaria and parts of Turkey. And of all of my Scillas...
I'm picking one, sorry.
Oh, he picked one. Of all of my Scillas, it is probably the best doer. It self-seeds itself like there is no tomorrow, and it has made this fabulous river-like drift that's wafted
really
right down
has.
through the rock garden.
And it's found the most kind of perfect crevices.
It looks so natural and beautiful.
Yeah.
From Bulgaria.
Yeah.
Is it a similar sort of woodlandy lover as the others that we've looked at?
Yeah, it seems to prefer a not too hot and dry an aspect.
Yeah.
Certainly here it's facing south with a bamboo hedge behind it. Whilst it's in growing mode, it wouldn't get a lot of direct sunlight. When it dies down in the summer, the bed gets a little bit more sun when the sun gets high, but then it has got also the gravel mulch over it to keep things cooler.
Yeah.
Now, you wanted to point out the seedlings, just
Yes.
so that people could see.
We've got seedlings coming up in the edge of the gravel driveway down
We'll
here.
come in and show closer.
Yeah, so we'll show you a close-up of it. So they're last season's flowers seeds, and the first year when they come up like a little tiny onion seedling.
I was going to say, they look with the sort of the hooked leaf. Like
Yeah,
an
yeah,
onion.
yeah. They're just like a little tiny onion seedling. So you do have to learn to recognise some of these plants in their first initial season, because they don't always look much like the sort of grown-up one.
Like trilliums. And in our trillium video, we actually had the 3 stages of the plant,
Yeah.
the 3 years. And the first year is very different from the second and the third.
Oh,
So
yes. Yeah,
good
so-
to know.
Yeah, so we'll show you those, and this particular one has probably been in the garden here for 6 or 8 years. It probably started as one little tiny clump of bulbs, and it's worked its way between all the rocks right down through the crevices, and it is absolutely exquisite every spring.
It really is. So Bulgarian, hardy-wise... can take
Reasonably
off.
hardy,
Yep.
yeah, it's reasonably hardy. It doesn't like dry, hot, sunny, deserty conditions. And again, like most of these bulbs, it doesn't like tropical climes because the weather's the wrong way around for them.
There you go, but there's other amazing things you can grow in the tropics.
Of course there is. Now, I know you're all going to ask, because it's right there, and I do love blue and yellow together. So this is just a little tiny Narcissus, one of the Narcissus jonquilla forms. So it's a true jonquill, highly perfumed. The rich blue with the bright yellow, I have to say, is just fabulous. So blue and yellow are a great combination.
What a beautiful drift that was. So unlike the others, it's drifted. Now, what else do you have next to you here?
All right, well, I've got something here that for a long time was a Scilla and is no longer.
Oh, what a dainty, beautiful flower.
Yeah, so that used to be Scilla greilhuberi, which also comes from Turkey. For whatever reason, the botanists have taken it out of Scilla, so it's now in a genus called Fessia. So it's Fessia greilhuberi, and it makes a scruffy looking pot plant because it has such long, daggy leaves. But if you plant it in the garden, its leaves will sit flat across the ground, its flower spikes sit well above the leaves, and it actually works quite well in the garden. I find this one gratifying in the garden because it gently self-seeds without becoming obnoxious, and so I've got several nice little drifts of it slowly building up around the garden, and it's one of the earliest of the, what was Scillas that I grow. So it's flowered through the late winter into the early spring, and it's just a really pretty little plant.
And so it's from Turkey. Is it from similar woodland conditions?
Yeah, it seems to be. It seems to like the, growing in amongst the roots of trees, in the semi-shade. I think it would cope with almost full sun in lots of parts, but here that seems to be where it grows best.
Stunning, absolutely stunning. I love the just the form of the flower. It's, I don't know.
It's almost like a cyclamen. The petals all curl back, and then the stamens sort of sit out at the bottom. So it's got that sort of shooting star effect, which I think is very elegant.
Very elegant indeed. Okay, and then the last cab off the rank.
Yes. This one I struggle with a bit.
Why, Stephen? Why?
Because it comes from Siberia. This is Scilla siberica.
We are not in Siberia.
Yeah, it grows, but it doesn't flourish for me. This year it's setting quite a bit of seed, so who knows, I might be able to build its quantities up. Scilla siberica is a very popular and easy to obtain garden bulb in England, but we rarely see it for sale here again because it doesn't multiply by the bulbs all that well, and I think it needs a distinct winter chill if it's going to really perform well. So it's borderline for my climate, but it's a lovely little intense blue, and it's very closely related to the Turkish one that we started off with, melaina.
But so far from home.
Yeah, well, there you go. But it's in the same group and probably has an ancestor in common somewhere. So that's Scilla siberica, the Siberian bluebell.
Well, then just quickly, how do you grow it? Does it need, is it a woodland plant again, full sun?
It seems to like a little bit of sun to do its best, but it will cope with semi-woodland conditions as well. But I do think it needs that winter chill to really sort of oomph up the bulbs so that they will perform well. Because I never get it to flower as prolifically as I've seen it in images and things from English gardens. They might have been photoshopping, who knows. It grows and flowers, but it never does an awful lot for me here.
Well, it's very pretty in this pot. Well, there we are. Well, Stephen, the alternative bluebells. I mean, we don't need to go into the Spanish and the English bluebell because everyone knows those, and we know the Spanish one here because it is a thug.
It is, and I have a small Howard's End forest of them in the garden here as well. If you plant the Spanish bluebell, It's like many plants we've talked about on our programs before. Once you've got it, you've always got it. Exactly.
There you go. Well, this has been so interesting and so beautiful. These plants, oh my goodness, absolutely wonderful. Well, there we go. Our romp through sort of species bluebells. What could we possibly do next week, Stephen?
Well, it won't be bluebells, I promise, but it will be something else horticultural, and it'll probably be completely unrelated to what we've done today.
There you go. So if you want to know what it is, you'll have to hit subscribe. We post every Friday, so do come along and join us on our horticultural adventures. If you've got any suggestions or questions, do put them in the messages below. We're always very keen to find out what you might want us to do, within reason.
Yes, and I do check every day, and I'm fairly good at answering people's questions, so why not join in and make use of us?
Stephen is the guru, I'm not. Anyway, but enough of that. Let's not limit ourselves. Let's look forward to next week, Stephen.
Yes, goodbye all, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.